On a humid summer morning in 2007, somewhere in the low-lying parishes of Louisiana, where the cypress trees grow thick and the air hangs heavy with moisture, a young woman named Kristi Comeaux walked out of her modest home to start what should have been an ordinary day. She was 23 years old, a recent graduate working her first professional job at a local elementary school, living in the small community where she had grown up. By nightfall, she would be gone. Her car would be found abandoned on a gravel road 17 miles from her house, driver's door open, keys still in the ignition, her purse sitting untouched on the passenger seat. No signs of struggle, no witnesses, no explanation. For 16 years, her family would wake each morning to the same question hanging in the thick Louisiana air. What happened to Kristi Comeaux? The town of Iberville Parish sits in the southeastern quadrant of Louisiana, a place where the Mississippi River curves through flatlands dotted with sugar cane fields and stands of old-growth forest. In 2007, the population hovered around 33,000, spread across communities where everyone knew everyone, where families had lived for generations, where secrets were hard to keep but often necessary. The parish had its share of troubles, the kind that come with rural poverty and isolation, but it was the sort of place where people still left their doors unlocked, where children played in yards until the streetlights came on, where a young woman could drive alone without fear. Kristi Comeaux lived with her parents in a single-story brick home on the outskirts of town, the kind with a chain-link fence around the yard, and a carport where her father kept his tools organized on pegboard. She was the youngest of 3 children, the baby of the family, with dark hair that fell past her shoulders, and a smile that neighbors would later describe as genuine, the kind that reached her eyes. She had graduated from Louisiana State University the previous spring with a degree in education, and had just finished her first year as a teacher's aide at Robert C. Blake's elementary school. Those who knew her said she was dependable, the sort of person who arrived early and stayed late, who remembered birthdays and asked about your children. On the morning of July 17, 2007, the temperature was already climbing toward 90 degrees by 8 o'clock. The air smelled of cut grass and the faint chemical sweetness of the nearby industrial plants that lined the river. Kristi's mother, Sandra Comeaux, had already left for her shift at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. Her father, Robert, was in the garage, sorting through fishing equipment for a weekend trip. Inside the house, Kristi moved through her morning routine with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done the same thing hundreds of times before. She showered. She made coffee in the automatic drip machine that sat on the counter. She ate a bowl of cereal standing at the sink, looking out the window at the backyard where the grass needed cutting. She dressed in jeans and a light blue t-shirt, casual clothes because it was summer break, and she was heading to the school to help organize supplies for the upcoming academic year. She gathered her purse, a brown leather shoulder bag her grandmother had given her for graduation. She picked up her keys from the dish by the door. At approximately 8:45 in the morning, she walked through the carport, waved at her father who was bent over a tackle box, and climbed into her vehicle, a silver 2004 Honda Civic with a small dent in the rear bumper from a parking lot incident the previous winter. "I'll be back around lunch," she called out. Her father raised one hand in acknowledgement without looking up. He would replay that moment in his mind thousands of times in the years to come, wishing he had turned around, wishing he had said something more than the casual grunt he offered instead. Kristi backed out of the driveway at 8:47. A neighbor, Mrs. Helen Thibodeaux, who lived 3 houses down and was watering her azaleas, saw the silver Honda pass. She noted the time because she always watered at the same hour, a creature of habit, and she would tell investigators later that Kristi had waved, that everything seemed normal, that there was nothing, absolutely nothing, that suggested anything was wrong. The drive to Robert C. Blake's elementary school should have taken approximately 14 minutes. The route was straightforward, left out of the subdivision, right onto Highway 75, straight for 8 miles, left onto School Road. Kristi had driven it nearly every weekday for the past year. She knew every turn, every pothole, every place where the pavement cracked and the road department hadn't gotten around to fixing it. She never arrived at the school. At 10:15 that morning, the principal, Mrs. Dorothy Landry, called Kristi's cell phone. It rang 5 times and went to voicemail. Mrs. Landry left a message asking if everything was all right, if Kristi was still planning to come in. At 11, she called again. Same result. At noon, concerned now because Kristi had never been unreliable, never missed an appointment without calling, Mrs. Landry phoned the Comeaux residence. Sandra answered. She had just arrived home from her shift. Kristi left hours ago, she said, her voice already carrying the first edge of worry. She should have been there by 9. Mrs. Landry felt her stomach tighten. She never showed up. The next call went to the Iberville Parish Sheriff's Office. Deputy Marcus Bro took the report at 12:27. A young woman, 23 years old, left home at 8:47, never arrived at her destination 14 minutes away. He noted the details with the careful handwriting of someone who had filed hundreds of similar reports, most of which ended with the missing person walking through their front door with a perfectly reasonable explanation. He dispatched a unit to drive the route between the Comeaux home and the school. At 1:33 that afternoon, Deputy James Rodriguez spotted the silver Honda Civic. It was parked on the shoulder of County Road 512, a narrow 2-lane strip of cracked asphalt that cut through farmland and patches of forest. The road was a shortcut, not the main route to the school, but locals used it to avoid traffic on the highway. The car sat at an angle, front wheels slightly off the pavement, driver's door hanging open. Deputy Rodriguez approached with his hand near his service weapon, not expecting trouble but trained for caution. The interior was pristine. No blood, no signs of struggle. Kristi's purse sat on the passenger seat, wallet inside with $43 in cash and her credit cards untouched. Her cell phone lay on the center console, battery dead. The keys dangled from the ignition, turned to the off position. A half-empty bottle of water sat in the cup holder, still cool to the touch. On the back seat, a canvas tote bag contained school supplies, folders, markers, construction paper still in its wrapper. Deputy Rodriguez called it in. Within 30 minutes, County Road 512 was blocked at both ends. Sheriff's vehicles lined the shoulders. A forensics team from the state police barracks in Baton Rouge was en route. By 3 o'clock, search teams were assembling. The immediate area around the vehicle revealed nothing. No footprints in the soft dirt at the road's edge. No tire tracks suggesting another vehicle had stopped. No torn clothing snagged on branches. The Honda's odometer showed the car had traveled approximately 9.3 miles from the Comeaux home, which aligned with the distance along the back road route. This detail would matter later, would become one of those small facts that investigators returned to again and again. As the afternoon stretched into evening, the search expanded. Volunteers from the community arrived with flashlights and walking sticks. They moved in lines through the dense undergrowth on either side of the road, calling Kristi's name, listening for any response. The air filled with the sounds of breaking branches, of voices shouting, of radios crackling with coordinates and status updates. Robert Comeaux stood at the edge of the search perimeter, his face gray, his hands shaking as he gripped a thermos of coffee someone had handed him. Sandra sat in the back of a patrol car, door open, staring at her daughter's vehicle which had been cordoned off with yellow tape. Neither of them spoke. What was there to say? Their daughter had vanished between one moment and the next, swallowed by a summer morning that had seemed like any other. By midnight, when the search paused until daylight, they had found nothing. No trace of Kristi Comeaux, no clues, no answers. Just a silver Honda with its door hanging open and a question that would haunt everyone who heard it. Where did she go? Part 2. The Investigation. The official search operation began at dawn on July 18. Sheriff Raymond LeBlanc coordinated teams that included parish deputies, state police, Louisiana wildlife and fisheries agents with tracking dogs, and more than 200 volunteers from surrounding communities. They divided the area into grids, each section assigned to a specific team, each team responsible for combing through every inch of ground within their designated zone. The terrain made the work difficult. County Road 512 cut through a mix of active farmland and abandoned properties overgrown with kudzu and wild blackberry. Drainage ditches ran parallel to the road, some dry, some holding stagnant water thick with algae. Patches of forest thick with palmetto and pine pressed close to the pavement in places. The heat was oppressive, humidity so thick it felt like breathing through wet cloth. Searchers worked in shifts, rotating out when exhaustion or heat threatened to overcome them. The tracking dogs, 2 bloodhounds named Rufus and Belle, were given items from Kristi's bedroom to establish her scent. They circled the Honda repeatedly, noses to the ground, then moved to the road's shoulder. Both dogs showed interest in the same spot, approximately 15 feet from the driver's door, but then the trail went cold. The handlers, experienced men who had worked dozens of searches, found this puzzling. "It's like she just stopped existing at that point," one of them told investigators. "The dogs can't pick up anything beyond that spot, not a trace." Media descended on Iberville Parish by the second day. Television news trucks from Baton Rouge and New Orleans parked along the highway. Reporters stood in front of cameras describing the mysterious disappearance, showing footage of the search teams, interviewing anyone who would talk. Kristi's photograph appeared on the evening news, that graduation picture with her genuine smile, and suddenly the case belonged to everyone, became a topic of conversation in break rooms and coffee shops across southern Louisiana. The community response was overwhelming. Businesses donated food and water for the searchers. Churches organized prayer vigils. A local print shop produced flyers with Kristi's photograph and information. People who had never met the Comeaux family showed up to help, driven by that fundamental human need to do something, anything, in the face of inexplicable tragedy. But as the search expanded and the days passed, investigators began noticing inconsistencies that didn't fit the narrative of a random encounter. The first oddity involved Kristi's route. County Road 512 was indeed a shortcut to the school, but it was a shortcut that added risk. The road was poorly maintained, narrow, with blind curves and no shoulder in places. Most people who worked at the school, when interviewed, said they used the highway route despite the slightly longer distance because it was safer, better maintained. Why had Kristi chosen this particular road on this particular morning? The second inconsistency emerged from the forensic examination of the Honda. While the exterior showed no damage, the interior revealed something peculiar. The driver's seat was adjusted forward, nearly 6 inches closer to the pedals than Kristi normally set it. Her father, when asked to sit in the car and adjust the seat to where his daughter usually kept it, moved it significantly back. "She was 5'6", Robert Comeaux said, his voice breaking. "She never sat that close to the wheel." Never. Deputies whispered quietly among themselves about a third detail: the timing. Kristi had left home at 8:47. The odometer showed she had traveled 9.3 miles. Even accounting for the winding nature of County Road 512, That distance should have taken no more than 12 to 15 minutes to cover. But no one had seen the Honda on the road's shoulder until Deputy Rodriguez spotted it at 1:33, nearly 5 hours later. Where had the car been during that missing time? More importantly, where had Kristi been? Then there was the matter of the man who had been dating Kristi for the past 8 months. His name was Travis Guidry, 26 years old, a mechanic at a shop in town. He and Kristi had met at a mutual friend's barbecue the previous November. Those who knew him said he was quiet, kept to himself, had grown up in the parish with a reputation for being handy with engines but not much for conversation. Kristi's friends described the relationship as serious, said Kristi had talked about a future with Travis, though they had never been formally engaged. Travis was among the volunteers who showed up to search on the first day. He arrived at the command post at 7 in the morning before most of the organized teams had assembled. Several people noticed his demeanor. While others appeared anxious, emotional, visibly distressed, Travis seemed calm, controlled. He moved through the search methodically, checking areas and moving on, his face revealing little. When Kristi Comeaux approached him, tears streaming down her face, asking if he had any idea where Kristi might be, he simply shook his head and said, "No, ma'am. I wish I did." Detective Paul Arsenault, a 20-year veteran of the sheriff's office assigned to lead the investigation, took note of Travis's composure. It wasn't necessarily suspicious. People reacted to crisis in different ways, but it was worth noting. On the third day of the search, Arsenault asked Travis to come to the station to provide a formal statement. The interview took place in a small room with cinder block walls painted institutional beige. Travis sat across from Arsenault and another detective, hands folded on the table, answering questions in a measured tone. When had he last seen Kristi? The evening of July 16, the night before she disappeared. They had dinner at a restaurant in town, nothing fancy, just burgers and conversation. What time did dinner end? Around 8:30. Did he take her home? No, she had driven herself. They had taken separate vehicles. Did they argue? No, everything was fine, normal. What did they talk about? Regular stuff. Work, plans for the weekend, nothing important. Where was he the morning of July 17? At work. He had opened the shop at 7, was there all day until he heard about Kristi being missing and joined the search. Who could verify that? His boss, customers who came in. He provided names. Arsenault checked the alibi. It held. Multiple witnesses confirmed Travis had been at the mechanic shop throughout the morning. But something about the interview bothered the detective, something he couldn't quite articulate. Travis's answers were too smooth, too rehearsed. There was no fumbling for details, no emotional reaction to questions about his missing girlfriend. Just calm, measured responses delivered in a flat tone. For those who have ever interviewed someone in crisis, Detective Arsenault would later write in his notes, you develop an instinct for what normal grief looks like. It's messy. It's incoherent. It's people contradicting themselves because they're trying to remember through a fog of fear. Travis Guidry wasn't messy. He was precise, and that precision felt wrong. Physical evidence offered no answers. The forensics team processed the Honda thoroughly. They found Kristi's fingerprints throughout the interior, as expected. They found Travis's fingerprints on the passenger door handle and dashboard, consistent with him having been in the vehicle on previous occasions. They found no blood, no hair that didn't belong to Kristi, no fibers that seemed out of place. The vehicle told them nothing they didn't already know. The search continued for 2 weeks. Teams combed through 50 square miles of countryside. Divers searched retention ponds and canals. Helicopter surveys scanned from above. But the land yielded no secrets. Kristi Comeaux had simply ceased to exist somewhere between her parents' driveway and a point 15 feet from her abandoned car. By early August, the active search began to wind down. Volunteers returned to their regular lives. News cameras left for other stories. The investigation remained open, classified as a missing person case, but without new leads or evidence, there was little for detectives to pursue. They interviewed everyone who knew Kristi, everyone who might have seen something, everyone who had any connection to County Road 512 that morning. They followed up on tips that came through the hotline, each one dutifully checked and ultimately leading nowhere. Travis Guidry remained a person of interest, though he was never formally named a suspect. Detectives kept him under observation, watching for any change in behavior, any slip that might reveal knowledge he shouldn't possess. But Travis maintained his routine. He went to work. He came home. He occasionally visited the Comeaux family, sitting in their living room in uncomfortable silence, offering condolences that seemed genuine enough but still struck Detective Arsenault as somehow hollow. By October 2007, the case had gone cold. Not closed, never closed, but dormant. The file sat in a cabinet at the sheriff's office, thick with reports and photographs and witness statements that all led to the same conclusion: no conclusion at all. Somewhere in Louisiana, a young woman had vanished, and no one knew why or how or what had become of her. The mystery hung over Iberville Parish like the humid air, heavy and inescapable, a question without an answer. Part 3: The Silence. 3 years passed with the weight of silence. The Comeaux family existed in a state of suspended grief, unable to mourn properly because mourning required an ending, and they had no ending, only absence. Sandra kept Kristi's room exactly as it had been. The bed made, the closet full of clothes, photographs on the dresser. She would sometimes stand in the doorway, not entering, just looking, as if by maintaining the space she could somehow keep her daughter tethered to the world. Robert grew quieter. He stopped fishing, couldn't bear the solitude of sitting by water with his thoughts. He went to work at the plant, came home, ate dinner in front of the television. The tackle box remained in the garage, gathering dust, a monument to the last ordinary moment before everything changed. They had received no ransom demand. No body had been found. No witnesses had come forward with information. The case simply existed in limbo, and they existed with it, caught between hope and despair, unable to commit fully to either. In 2009, the family made the decision to relocate. The house held too many memories, too many mornings of waking up and remembering all over again. They moved to a smaller place in Lafayette, 40 miles west, seeking distance from the site of their loss. But geography provided no escape. The question followed them: what happened to Kristi? Travis Guidry also moved. In early 2010, he left Iberville Parish for a job at a larger automotive shop in Hammond, 60 miles northeast. Those who knew him noted the timing, noted that he had stayed in the parish for more than 2 years after Kristi's disappearance, and only left once the active investigation had truly gone dormant. But suspicion is not evidence, and Travis had never been charged with anything, had never even been publicly named as a person of interest. Detective Arsenault, who had retired in 2011, never forgot the case. It was the one that haunted him, the one he thought about during insomnia nights, the one that felt solvable if only he could find the right thread to pull. He kept copies of his notes, occasionally reviewing them, looking for patterns he might have missed. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, who have felt that terrible intuition that something is wrong beneath the surface of normalcy, you understand the psychological territory the Comeaux family inhabited during those years. They never spoke openly about their suspicions regarding Travis. To voice them felt like betrayal, felt like accusation without proof, felt dangerous in ways they couldn't articulate. But the suspicions lived in the spaces between words, in the glances exchanged when someone mentioned his name, in the way conversations would stall when the topic came too close to uncomfortable truths. Then in March 2015, something shifted. Travis had married in 2012, a woman named Jennifer who worked at a dental office in Hammond. They had a daughter born in 2013, a little girl named Emma. By all outward appearances, Travis had built a normal life. He went to work. He came home to his family. He coached his daughter's youth soccer team. Neighbors described him as quiet but friendly, the sort of man who kept his lawn neat and waved when you drove past. But Jennifer noticed things. Small things at first. The way Travis sometimes stared into space with an expression she couldn't read. The way he flinched when news reports mentioned missing persons cases. The way he insisted on controlling every detail of their lives, from finances to social plans to what route they took when driving anywhere. In therapy sessions she began attending for anxiety, Jennifer described a growing sense of unease, though she couldn't pinpoint its source. "It's like living with someone who's always performing," she told her therapist. "Like he's constantly aware of being watched, even when it's just us." The marriage began to deteriorate. Arguments became more frequent. Travis grew more controlling, more insistent on knowing where Jennifer was at all times, who she talked to, what she did. In conversations with friends, Jennifer mentioned that Travis had a past he never discussed, a previous relationship that had ended badly, though he refused to provide details. Then one night in early 2015, Emma, who was 18 months old, woke screaming from a nightmare. Jennifer went to comfort her, but Travis got there first. He sat on the edge of their daughter's bed, holding her, whispering, "It's okay. She's not here, she can't find us." Jennifer stood in the doorway, frozen. "Who can't find us?" Travis looked up, realizing what he had said. His face went blank. "No one, just the nightmare. I was talking about the nightmare." But Jennifer knew in the way you know things that bypass rational thought and lodge directly in your gut. Something was profoundly wrong. Her husband was running from something, hiding something, carrying something that weighed on him even in moments with his own child. The revelation came not through dramatic confrontation, but through accumulated moments of doubt. Jennifer began paying attention differently. She noticed that Travis never wanted to drive through Iberville Parish, would go miles out of his way to avoid it. She noticed that he had no photographs from before 2008, claimed they had been lost in a move. She noticed that when she asked about his past, about old friends, about family, he deflected or changed the subject. In June 2015, Jennifer left. She took Emma and moved in with her parents in Slidell. She filed for separation, citing irreconcilable differences, though the real differences were ones she couldn't name in legal documents, couldn't prove, could only feel. Travis's behavior changed after the separation. Coworkers noticed him becoming more withdrawn, more prone to errors at work, showing up late or not at all. He was fired in August 2015 for missing too many shifts without calling in. Friends who tried to reach out were rebuffed. He seemed to be unraveling, though unraveling toward what no one could say. Part 4. The Revelation. The case broke open on November 3, 2023, 16 years after Kristi Comeaux disappeared. Jennifer Guidry, now divorced and living under her maiden name, contacted the Iberville Parish Sheriff's Office. She asked to speak with someone about a cold case. When asked which case, she said 3 words: Kristi Comeaux disappearance. The call was transferred to Detective Lisa Hebert, who had inherited the case file when she joined the Criminal Investigations Division in 2018. Hebert had reviewed the file multiple times, had spoken with Detective Arsenault after his retirement, had always felt that the answer existed somewhere in the pages of reports, if only she could see it from the right angle. Jennifer agreed to meet at the sheriff's office. On November 5, she sat across from Detective Hebert and two other investigators in the same interview room where Travis had been questioned 16 years earlier. "I need to tell you about my ex-husband," Jennifer began, her hands trembling around a cup of coffee. "I need to tell you what I know." What she knew came in fragments, pieces of conversations overheard, behaviors observed, suspicions accumulated over years of marriage. She described Travis's refusal to discuss his past, his reaction to news coverage of missing persons, the nightmares he had, screaming himself awake, though he would never discuss what he had dreamed, the way he had broken down crying one night in 2014, drunk, saying, "I can't undo it. I can't take it back." "Did he say what he couldn't undo?" Detective Hebert asked. "No, when I pushed him about it the next day, he denied saying anything, said I must have misheard him." Jennifer also provided something else. During the divorce proceedings, she had gained access to Travis's phone records for the purpose of documenting his locations during custody negotiations. Going back through old records, she noticed something peculiar about July 17, 2007. Travis's phone had pinged off a cell tower near County Road 512 at 9:17 that morning, not near the mechanic shop where he claimed to have been working. Near the location where Kristi's car would later be found. "I didn't know what it meant at the time," Jennifer said. "But after I started putting things together, after I really thought about everything, I knew I had to call you." Detective Hebert felt her pulse quicken. This was it. This was the thread. The investigation reopened with renewed focus. Detectives subpoenaed Travis's complete phone records from 2007. The data confirmed Jennifer's finding. At 9:17 on the morning of July 17, Travis's phone had connected to a tower that serviced the area around County Road 512. At 10:45, his phone reconnected to a tower near his workplace, consistent with him being at the mechanic shop. This contradicted his alibi. Travis had claimed to be at work all morning, but his phone had been near the site of Kristi's disappearance, in the window of time when she had vanished. Investigators reviewed the original witness statements. Travis's boss at the mechanic shop had confirmed Travis opened the shop at 7, but the boss hadn't stayed. He had left to run errands and didn't return until 11. The customers who came in during the morning had time stamps that began at 11:15. There was a gap, a window of opportunity. On November 18, 2023, detectives obtained a search warrant for Travis's current residence, a small apartment in Covington where he had moved after losing his job. Inside, they found a storage box in the back of his closet. The box contained photographs of Kristi, dozens of them, some that appeared to have been taken without her knowledge. It contained newspaper clippings about her disappearance. It contained a journal. The journal entries were sporadic, undated, but clearly written over a period of years. Much of it was incoherent, fragments of thoughts and self-justifications. But certain passages stood out. "Couldn't let her leave me. Couldn't let her tell everyone what she knew. Nobody understands what it's like to carry this, to wake up every day knowing. Sometimes I dream that I could go back, that I could choose different, but you can't unmake choices." The most damning entry read, "County Road 512, that's where it ended. That's where I left her, deep enough that they'll never look, deep enough that the water will keep the secret." On November 20, 2023, Travis Guidry was arrested at his apartment. He was charged with second-degree homicide in connection with the disappearance of Kristi Comeaux. The arrest was front-page news across Louisiana. The cold case that had haunted Iberville Parish for 16 years suddenly thrust back into public consciousness. Those who had known Travis in 2007 expressed shock. "He seemed so normal," said a former coworker. "He searched for her. He was out there with the rest of us." But others, when interviewed, admitted they had always wondered. "There was something about him," said a volunteer who had worked the search. "The way he was so calm, like he already knew she wasn't going to be found." Based on the journal entry referencing water and depth, investigators returned to County Road 512 with ground-penetrating radar and expanded their search to include a network of drainage canals that had been only cursorily checked in 2007. On December 4, 2023, in a canal 300 yards from where the Honda had been found, buried under 16 years of sediment and debris, they recovered human remains. Dental records confirmed the identity: Kristi Comeaux. The medical examiner determined cause of passing as strangulation. The condition of the remains indicated she had been placed in the water shortly after her end, consistent with the timeline of her disappearance. Travis Guidry refused to speak after his arrest. His attorney entered a plea of not guilty, but the evidence mounted: the phone records, the journal, the photographs. Investigators theorized that Travis had lured Kristi to County Road 512 that morning, perhaps with a fabricated emergency or mechanical problem. That he had ended her life, perhaps in a fit of rage or control, perhaps because she had threatened to end the relationship, perhaps for reasons that would never be fully understood. That he had concealed the vehicle for hours before abandoning it in a way designed to suggest a random encounter. The trial was scheduled for April 2024. The prosecution laid out a case built on circumstantial evidence and Travis's own written confessions. The defense argued that the journal was fiction, that Travis had been obsessed with the case but not responsible for it. But the jury, after deliberating for 7 hours, returned a verdict: guilty of second-degree homicide. On June 12, 2024, Travis Guidry was sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. In the courtroom, Sandra and Robert Comeaux sat in the front row. When the verdict was read, Sandra closed her eyes. Robert reached for her hand. They didn't celebrate. How could they? Their daughter was still gone. Justice didn't restore her, but perhaps it provided a kind of resolution, an answer to the question that had haunted them for 16 years. After the sentencing, Sandra spoke briefly to reporters gathered on the courthouse steps. "We never stopped looking for the truth," she said, her voice steady despite tears. "We never stopped believing that someone knew what happened to our Kristi. Today, we finally know. It doesn't bring her back, but at least we know." Closing. The case of Kristi Comeaux became one of those stories that resonates beyond its immediate tragedy. A reminder that sometimes the person responsible for harm is not a stranger in the shadows, but someone close, someone trusted, someone who wears the mask of normalcy while carrying unbearable secrets. It speaks to the persistence of investigators who never truly close a case in their minds, to family members who live with uncertainty for years, to the small details that eventually form a pattern if you look long enough and carefully enough. In Iberville Parish, there is a memorial bench now, placed near the elementary school where Kristi worked, inscribed with her name and the years that bracket her too short life. Students who never knew her sit there during lunch, and sometimes teachers tell them about the young woman who loved education, who had been looking forward to starting her own classroom, who disappeared one summer morning and wasn't found until years of silence finally gave way to truth. Clears throat. If this story mattered to you, subscribe and hit the bell. Share the episode. Someone somewhere may still be waiting to be heard.